Hello everybody, just to follow up on my 5-minute camera primer video that I did last week, I'm just going to do a quick tutorial now to show you how to set up, quite simply, a tracking camera using the new system that will follow our player around, and also that I can move smoothly between tracking one object and another, and that eases its position so that the camera moves smoothly and doesn't just sort of snap from place to place. Okay, it's a very, very simple system and is a great starting block for basically almost any 2D game, or the vast majority of 2D games can use this sort of camera system really easily. So the very first thing you want to do is make sure you have a viewport set up for your camera, okay? So over here in the room properties, you'll see viewports and cameras. Unfold that, make sure you've got enable viewports ticked, clear viewport background ticked, and with viewport 0, I'm going to set that to visible, and you can see that creates this big white rectangle here, which shows what the default view as you set it up from here would be. So by default, by just enabling this viewport, a default camera is set up which will result in this white rectangle view, right? And by changing these properties, I can change what this is using the basic view system, yeah? But we're not going to use the old views way of working with things. We're going to work with a camera just so we can get a good feel for how it actually works. But I'm still going to want to set my viewport properties to be whatever I want the viewport to be on the screen. And since this is my first room, that'll define the actual sort of resolution of my game unless I do it in another way. So I set that to 640 by 480 so that when I run the game, I should just get a 640 by 480 window and 640 by 480 pixels as well, resolution, so that nothing is stretched or like squashed or anything like that, okay? So that's all I have at the moment. I have a default view and a default camera is set up for me, and I could manipulate that using various functions in GameMaker that basically let you do things in the same way you used to in GameMaker 1.x. But we're going to work with the new camera system just so you can kind of see how that works. So go ahead and right-click in Object and hit Create, and we're going to make Camera. Okay, this object is going to control all of our kind of camera behavior, and it's just going to decide exactly how our camera works. So the first thing I want to do is add the create event for the camera. And what I want to do is, first of all, create a blank camera and put it in a variable. So I'm going to type camera equals camera underscore create. Open bracket, close bracket. That just creates a blank camera for us to assign some settings to. The settings that we need to apply are the view matrix and the projection matrix. If you don't know what either of those two things are, I really recommend just quickly watching my 5-minute primer video on cameras. As I say, it's not very long, it's only 5 minutes, and I'll explain these concepts and how they work in a simple way. We're just going to run through the code now so you can see how to practically set this stuff up. So first of all, I need my look at matrix, or my view matrix. So I'm going to type var vn equals matrix underscore build underscore look at, okay? And this creates the point in space for our camera, right? It determines whereabouts in 3D space our camera is and where it's looking at and what it considers to be up, okay, as its direction, so that we know kind of how to rotate the eventual view we're going to get, yeah? So my XYZ for my position I'm looking from is going to be X, Y, and -10, okay? Because how we're going to use this object is just going to be where our we'll just manipulate the coordinates of this object to manipulate where we actually want to point our camera, okay? And to keep that in a straight line, so we're not doing any weird angly stuff, I'm just going to keep the X2 exactly the same, so it's X and Y. But for this one, my Z position, so that we're looking forwards, is 0. So we're looking from a position of XY -10 to XY 0, which if you think in 3D space, imagine the camera kind of being in front of the screen, looking towards the screen, which is what we want. The last thing we need to set is the up direction for the camera. By setting X up, Y up, and Z up, we basically create a vector or a point in space that determines which direction our camera considers to be up. So for this, I just want Y to be up, and the way I do that is by typing 0 for X up, 1 for Y up, and 0 for Z up, okay? And then finally we're at the end of that function. It's quite long, there's a lot of stuff that needs to go into it. We now need to type a function with a longer name but with less stuff to actually put in it. var pm, which is going to be our projection matrix. So matrix underscore build underscore projection, if I can type, underscore ortho, which creates an orthographic projection. You can also do perspective projection if you're doing 3D stuff, but we just want a simple orthographic 2D projection. Okay, if you don't know anything about what an orthographic or perspective projection is, or what the difference between those is, I recommend looking in the manual. Just if you middle click on this, it'll bring up the GameMaker manual. There's a good description in there of how that stuff works. All we need to provide for our orthographic projection is the width of our camera, so 640, the height of the area that we want to capture, which is 480, the minimum distance from the camera that we want to render. So I'm going to say that's, I'll make it 1, okay, so like 1 pixel in front of the camera or whatever, or 1 unit of space, and the Z far is the maximum distance that we want to render. I'm just going to set that to something massive like 10,000, okay? Simple as that for that those two matrices, and then we just want to apply them to the camera that we just created. So I'm going to say camera underscore set view mat to be camera vm, and camera underscore set underscore proj mat to be camera and PM. Okay, so we're taking that camera object that we created and we're just applying those two matrices respectively. Okay. After we've done that, all we need to do is actually assign this camera to a viewport, because we've got all these settings in the camera. We've got a point in space and an area to look at, and now we just need to give it a viewport for it to actually render its output to. Okay, and that's why we set up a viewport in the room to begin with. We just did number 0, so I'm just going to type view underscore camera, open bracket, close bracket with 0, equals camera. And that's really as simple as that. Now, just to show that working, I can just place this somewhere. I'll place it somewhere different to this rectangle so we can kind of get the idea. So if I place it here, so we should see these little flowers and the little dude that just walks left and right constantly. So if I run that now, yeah, so we can see these little flowers, the dude like moving left and right constantly. Like that represents the center of our camera now, which is an interesting caveat of doing this rather than working with views where you would generally be working with the top left of the camera position. We're now just working with the center, okay, and we can change like the width and the height, which gives us a very easy way to sort of zoom in and out as well of our game just by changing the projection width and height respectively. That's a very quick and simple way to sort of zoom in and out of your game with a camera now, but we don't want to do any of that. We want to follow our player object around, okay? That's sort of a very basic common use of a camera, right? So in order to start setting that stuff up, I'm going to create some simple variables here in the create event first. I'm going to type follow equals oPlayer. So I'm going to use follow to be a variable that we track the object that we want to follow, and I'll write in something in a minute that will set it so that if follow equals no one, the keyword no one, which just translates to -4 really, but is useful as a way of saying no instance or no object, that, yeah, as I say, that variable is just going to track which object we happen to be following, and it gives us a really easy way from any other object or any other piece of code to be, say, with camera follow equals some other object, right? and just makes it a really simple system to make it so you can follow any object that you want. Okay, so having set that variable up, I then want two more variables. X2 equals, I'll set it to X, and Y2 equals Y, because we're going to use exactly the same system I used for a GameMaker Studio 1.4 tutorial for moving the camera around with nice simple easing. Okay, we're just going to use these two variables, x2 and y2, and that's the x coordinate we're moving to and the y coordinate we're moving to. Okay, and that, I'm just going to start those as x and y so that wherever I place the camera in the game room is where the camera will start off. You might want to manipulate that for your own needs, but that's all I'm going to do for this particular tutorial. So with those couple of variables set up, we can now add the step event, okay? And in the step event, all I'm going to do is move our current x and y coordinate towards x2 and y2 by a certain amount so that we get a smooth transition. So rather than just jumping, rather than just saying x equals x2, we just want to move towards it in a smooth way. So we move faster the further away we are from it, and then we sort of slow to a halt when we reach it. So to do that, I'm going to type x plus equals, so we're going to add a value to x, open bracket, x2 minus x divided by 25. So that's the difference between x2 and x divided by 25. So we're moving at a 25th of the distance between where we want to be and where we are. Okay? Which means that the further away we are, the faster we'll move, and as we get closer, that will drop off until we're moving a negligible distance because we've arrived, right? So y, I'm going to do the same thing, plus equals y2 minus y divided by 25. And that's all we really need in terms of moving this object around. What I'm going to do in terms of actually determining what x2 and y2 are is I'm just going to set them to be the coordinates of whatever instance we're following, which is assuming we are. So I'm going to type if follow does not equal no one. So an easy way to have the camera not follow anything or to do something different or special with the camera, you can just set it to follow nobody and it will ignore this advice. Advice, as if code is just a suggestion. It will ignore this instruction, it will ignore this code. It would be interesting if developing games you were just giving advice to all your objects. So it does feel that way sometimes, but no. So if we're not following anyone, it'll skip this, but if we are, it will do this. So x2 equals follow.x, okay? So it's just going to take whatever instance ID is in follow, or whatever object ID, and it's just going to move, it's just going to set x2 to be that x coordinate. And the same with y, follow.y, okay? Now, this still isn't really doing anything yet, right? So we need to actually make it so our camera moves to our x and y position, okay? We've done everything else, we just need to actually adjust the settings of our camera. Now, we can do that just by changing the view matrix again, okay? We just change that point in space that our camera is, and that'll change our resulting view rectangle. So var vm equals matrix underscore build underscore look at x, y minus 10, just as before, x, y, 0, just as before, and 0, 1, 0, just as before. It's exactly the same line of code, okay? Exactly the same numbers, because we're just getting our more up-to-date x and y after doing all this stuff, and we're just going to adjust that matrix to represent our new position instead. And then all we need to do is reapply that to the camera. So camera underscore set view underscore mat camera vm. And because our camera is still set, still applied to this viewport, we don't need to do that again. That's really all there is to it. So if I just run that now, as you can see in the create event, we set follow to be oPlayer. So you see the camera, it started in that bottom corner because that's where we placed it in the room, and then zoomed up towards where our player is. And you can see if I move around now, follows the player around like this, and just has a really nice sort of smooth effect. And you can change kind of how that feels just by playing with how you change the x and y coordinate, right? So if you move this by a smaller fraction, the camera would move faster. You can make it bigger, make it move slower. You could just set x to equals x2 if you wanted to snap the camera, or you can do whatever you like with it. Okay, it's really up to you. Just this framework allows you to do pretty much anything you want with the camera. Just to quickly demonstrate a way you can change it, if I just create another event in here, say key pressed enter, right? And I'm just going to type if follow equals O player, follow equals O other, which is the name of my other object, the other dude that just walks around the screen, else follow equals O player. Alright, simple stuff, and all that's going to do is just change what object is in the variable follow, so that now if I press enter, the camera moves to follow this dude, or moves back to my player, okay? And that just shows you very simply how you can move the camera around. Very useful for creating just simple cutscenes, or like drawing the player's focus or attention to something, or doing whatever you want. It's a really good starting block, really good foundation for a camera system for your game, for more or less any kind of game you need it for. So yeah, that's really all there is to it. That's a really simple way of just manipulating the position of the camera, just like that, just by changing that view matrix and just reapplying it to the camera. That's all you need to do. It's just those 2 lines of code just to move the camera once you've got it all set up in the first place. And you can do the same thing with the projection matrix, just to change the width and the height over time. Okay, simple as that. That's how you use cameras. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. If you find my videos to be really helpful and would like to see them more often with access to behind-the-scenes stuff, source code, games, and other goodies, consider supporting my work via Patreon and helping me do it all full-time. These cool wizards have done exactly that, so shoutouts to them for funding this video. Thanks, see you later.